friends, and welcome to my almost finished kitchen. It's been ages since we've done a kitchen tour. I've been promising that it's gonna come for the longest time, and finally it's here. Part of the problem with doing a video like this is it needs to be clean. So no, my kitchen doesn't always look like this. If yours is a complete wreck right now, you're usually in good company. This is hours of cleaning to make it look this sparkly and this beautiful just for you, because no one needs to see those dirty dishes. Although if you want to follow us over on Instagram, there are certainly pictures of dirty dishes in my stories over there. I'm gonna try and go through the kitchen, sweep through, and answer all these questions that y'all have been having for me over the last couple years. This kitchen story starts over 100 years ago when this house was first built. We know it was registered in 1909. We don't really know when the house was built, but we do know that this kitchen was part of the original house. And we know that because of the walls and the lumber that was used.
A huge thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. If you can drag and drop pictures and you know how to save a file, then you can build your next creative website with Squarespace. They've got ready-to-use templates that you can choose from and simply customize with whatever you'd like. This is exactly what we did when we launched Homemaker Chic Podcast last year, and we needed an easy way to link to social media pages and more. So whether you have a podcast, a nonprofit, an online community, or are looking for a way to easily sell your products, look no further than Squarespace. Get your new creative adventure started with a free trial and 10% off your purchase by visiting squarespace.com/Elliott Homestead.
Now, when we moved into this house, I'm gonna make sure we stick in some before pictures here so you can see what we walked into. The house as a whole was very 60s, 1960s. It hadn't been addressed in a long time. And so part of what we had to do in this kitchen is really just strip back layers and layers and layers, sort of bringing it back to its former glory. Now, lest you think, oh, it must be nice to just have a beautiful kitchen. We started this renovation 6 years ago, and we're just now getting to the point where, it's like the tiniest details that are left. So this has been a very long journey getting to this point. As you can see from those photos, we had to take a lot of stuff out of the kitchen. So one of the first things that we did was take out all those faux oak cupboards. I actually don't even know what they were. They were really well built, but they were not what we wanted in this space at all. What we did next was put up open shelving, which turns out didn't work for us either because I'm not very tall, and I found it really cumbersome to try to reach up on the shelves to get down stuff. So the kitchen, as many of you commented when I asked what you wanted to know about the kitchen, you said, man, it's gone through a lot of different sort of layouts and transitions. Yeah, it has. To get to this point, which looks really simple, took us a lot of failing. Open shelving was definitely one of those things for me. So what we did instead was actually convert this old icebox into our dish holder. Let me show you. So this we picked up for a couple $100 at an antique store. It was an old fridge unit, and instead we use it to store all of our dishes. So big plates, little plates, cups and bowls, and mugs. This works really well for us. I keep extras out in the dining room, but this makes it really easy for the kids to put dishes away from the dishwasher, and it holds our espresso machine. You guys may notice this is a new espresso machine, new to us anyway. It's a really old Craigslist find from an old coffee shop that we adapted to work in our home because our last espresso machine took up so much space in the kitchen. It had 2 big working heads that we really didn't need because it's just Stu and I drinking coffee for the most part. So this is a Fama espresso machine. I think it's maybe from the early 90s. Anyway, Craigslist find, works great. The top heats up, so it keeps your mugs nice and warm. And then we move on. Yes, we are still roasting our own coffee. This is the little canister made by a local winemaker who also does pottery. We have our little hand grinder here, which is a little bit of labor, but doesn't break. And then I keep just a little bin of regs here. And then, of course, right next to me is the stairway down to the root cellar, but that is another video. So moving through the kitchen here, you'll notice that this looks a lot different than it used to. The reason for that is we took off plaster And what we discovered behind it was a built-in cupboard. Imagine that, full of beer bottles and whiskey bottles. And we decided, of course, we're going to keep this instead of covering up. So this now is where I house kind of the things that I want to keep on hand all the time when I'm in the kitchen. Okay, so here is what I deem valuable enough to be upstairs in the kitchen rather than downstairs in the root cellar. Up top, you can see I have a couple copper double boilers, my big copper stock pot, and my grain grinder. Those are things I use often enough that they deserve to live in the kitchen. And then, of course, moving down, I just have some baking supplies like cornmeal, polenta, dates, einkorn wheat berries, that's salt, my kombucha SCOBY, and then I keep my cooking community recipes on hand because these are kind of the recipe books I use the most. So I keep them here. This is a little bit more of a baking shelf. We have granola for the kids, sugar, coffee beans that we roast, and then my spices and baking goods like baking powder and cornstarch and those kinds of things, where I can really easily accessible get to them. And then down here I keep my flours because this is kind of my bread baking station. And then I have just this old basket of sort of chips and breads or buns or things that we have like that aren't very pretty to look at and sort of need a place to be contained. Then of course my kitchen scale, paper towels for emergencies, and a box cheese grater. So this is all stuff that gets to live out here. And the big canister here is where I keep my all-purpose einkorn flour. This is the flour I use more than any other flour. This canister has lived on my countertop for basically as long as I've been in this kitchen. And then really the only appliance that gets to live out on the countertop is my KitchenAid mixer. So the three appliances that I use the most are the Vitamix blender, the Cuisinart food processor, and then the KitchenAid mixer. The first two I keep down in the root cellar, mainly because they're not that heavy, and so if I want to use them, I can bring them up pretty easily. The KitchenAid mixer is very heavy, and I find that if I put it under a counter or over on a table or anywhere other than here, I don't ever want to use it because I just find it kind of cumbersome to pick up. So it gets to live here. This counterpiece here is really the only part that remains from the kitchen as it was when we moved in. So these drawers were here, although we did sort of put on this trim here to kind of give them that look that we like. And of course, we painted them as well. So everybody's got a junk drawer. This is mine. It's where I keep my pens and matches and phone chargers. And then just sort of bits and baubles down through wine openers and, you know, mandolins and this kind of stuff. A couple drawers of that. And then the bottom drawer is my messy lid drawer because mason jars exist in this space significantly, especially when the cow's in milk. There's a lot of lids going on. So that's my lid drawer. This is a terrible dishwasher that we need to replace. Alas, it's what we have for now. We put it in just a couple of years ago, but one thing that I've learned is that when you don't buy something right the first time, you really do end up having to buy it multiple times. So this was kind of the best that we could afford at the time, and it already has had so many issues, and it really doesn't wash the dishes. I think it's really important for kids to practice chores, so our boys unload the dishwasher, Georgia loads it. And so we kind of just keep using it for that training part of it, although I much prefer to hand wash the dishes. So when we originally moved in, there was a window above the kitchen sink, albeit a very small one surrounded by really thick, dense cupboards. So once those all came down, this was a big investment into the kitchen, was to put a much bigger window in, because if you can see out, I don't know if you can with the glare, but this is my potager garden. And so this is where I can see insects and hummingbirds and children and flowers. So as I'm standing here doing the dishes, this is what I get to look out on. So widening the window to me was a no-brainer. And then you'll notice the walls around the window. These were all original to the house, but they were completely covered by thick layers of stucco and chicken wire and tar paper and all these horrible things. So we had to pull all of that off, and then this really old shiplap is what we found behind it. So what I did then is just plaster between the cracks of the shiplap, sand it all down so it was nice and smooth, pulled out all the old nails, filled any holes, and then kind of sealed the whole wall to hold everything in. And the result to me is just this restored glory of what used to be. We have found this kind of shiplap paneling in other old parts of the house, and we've exposed those as well. But having it here in the kitchen is really special. What was definitely not original to the house was this marble countertop. I've gotten a lot of questions about this because we film our cooking community in here, and so people see this kitchen a lot. And we had very thick fir countertops for a couple of years that Stuart custom made and put in, and they were beautiful. But what we didn't account for was eventually taking the stucco off the walls. When we found wood behind, I knew we had to keep it. So it was just a lot of wood. It was wood on wood on wood, and it just felt like way too much. Coupled with the fact that I became an aggressive bread baker and I'm always messing with dough of some kind, working it on a raw, untreated marble is really nice. It makes cleanup way easier than trying to get flour off of a wood countertop. And so this was actually marble that I picked out with my late friend Carla from Jovial, who helped me to settle on the right type of marble that we wanted. This is a Carrara marble that we got from Allied Marble in Seattle. They came and they installed it. We definitely had to save for it. We had to be patient for the install, but I'm very, very happy with the results. And I love how it's kind of this juxtaposition between these crusty old 100-year walls, and then you have this polished marble, and I love the way it turned out. All right, as we keep kind of circling through the kitchen here, the knives are where we land next. These also get a lot of questions, probably just because they're seen on a lot of videos. Most of these knives are a carbon steel knife that we get from antique stores. Stu has been trained to sharpen them on Japanese whetstones, and so these clean up really, really well. I love the patina on these old knives. I do use a couple of new ones. I have a Wusthof 9-inch chef knife, and then this is probably my favorite knife. This is a Kamikoto knife. I'll try to find a link for them and put it below the video. I use this knife probably more than any other knife, and this is another Kamikoto that I use as well. This is my little paring knife, and it just fits really well in my hand. The little knife holder that we had here, I don't remember the name of the store. It was just a magnetic knife holder that we got from Etsy that kind of fits perfectly on that wall. And I love where they're located because the kids cannot easily grab them, but I can. All right, moving on to what we get the most questions about by far, the Lakanch range. Why did we choose this one? What do I think about it? Is it electric? I wish that I had more detailed information for you, but it's gone out of my brain. I knew I wanted this stove because of the quality. It's all metal. There's not like little crazy digital buttons, which are constantly breaking. And from what I had heard from other Lakanch owners, this is like the stove that you pass down to your great-grandchildren. And so this, I knew, was the stove that I wanted. It fit the aesthetic of the kitchen, but they're also designed to be workhorses. And it just so happens that the showroom for Lakanch in North America is over in Bellevue, which is just a few hours away from us. So we were able to get it serviced really easily. I love this stove. I have zero regrets about buying it. Let's just get that out of the way. I have the Clooney model, which means that I actually have two different ovens. One is propane. Of course, all the top ranges of propane. And then the oven on the right is electric. The reason that I did this was because we do have power outages here. So if the power goes out, we're able to use the propane. And I find that they do bake a little differently. So my breads I do in the propane, it tends to cook just a little bit hotter. It heats up really quickly. And then the electric oven just is a little bit more gentle. So that's typically where I do my cookies or things like that. The great thing about this though is that because of how much we actually cook in this kitchen, I need two ovens because I'll maybe have some tomatoes roasting in one oven for preserving for the summer, but then I need to throw a chicken in for dinner tonight. The one downside I will say to this has just been adjusting to the size of the oven. Now, of course, you can get bigger ones, but these are smaller. They won't fit like the huge sheet pans that you see and that a lot of people are accustomed to using in their kitchen. And so that's just been a little bit of adjustment. For our family of 6, we've been able to cook everything that we have wanted. I've just sort of had to learn to use certain different pans to fit it all in. So we have 5 burners here. They all work super great. It's just so well loved, easy to clean up, zero regrets about the LaCanche at all. I love it, love it, love it. The copper that you see above the stove has been collected over the last decade. Stuart got me my first piece when we lived in Alabama from a beautiful kitchen supply store called Aubergine. I hope it's still there. It was beautiful. And the rest has just sort of trickled in over the years. Old, vintage, thick, high quality copper. They're expensive pieces, they're investment pieces, but they will literally last for hundreds of years. They're amazing. I love cooking with copper. All of this I cook with every day. And these are the kind of the pan sizes that I find I use the most. If you are looking to start building your copper collection, Kat in France over on Instagram does a monthly pop-up, and that's where I've gotten a lot of these pans. Actually, over the years, it's where I got my huge copper stock pot. So she's in France, her husband restores vintage French copper, and then she sells it in this pop-up once a month. And so I'll save up, go in 1 month and buy one piece, and then over time, it just adds up. So what I love about having it here is everyone knows how terrible pots and pans are to stack in a cupboard. It's a complete waste of space. I love the way they look here. It makes it really easy, and I can just reach over and grab whatever it is that I need. It's the perfect height for me. When I wash my copper, I do it all by hand, and then as the pieces go through, I use Barkeeper's Friend, which is a really great copper polish, and just sort of slowly do them a little bit every time I use one. Then I can tell if I haven't used a pan in a while because they do patina. When you get them really nice and polished on that first day, they have like this little shiny pink rosy look, and then it just sort of, you know, patinas with the air over time. I love the look of this. I kind of go back and forth. Do I want it really clean? Do I want it patinaed? Ultimately, it just kind of does what it wants anyway. One of the questions we get asked a lot, Stuart just reminded me, and I'm glad he did, is don't you have a vent hood? Like how do you vent your stove? No, we don't have a vent hood, and no, we don't really want one. I find them very cumbersome. So the next question is like, well, how do you keep things from getting greasy? Well, the copper pans and such, I use them all enough that they're constantly being washed. So that's not really a problem. If I'm gonna make something super messy, maybe I'm gonna fry food or something like a sausage that has a lot of grease, a lot of times I'll cook it outside because we can. We have a little propane stove out there that we use. But on the whole, I'm a pretty clean cook. And so, every once in a while, maybe once a month, I'll kind of wipe off the wallpaper and wipe off the ceiling every couple months, but really it has not been a major problem. This is actually like stove hoods are a fairly new thing that people wire in. The sound of them absolutely makes me crazy. So this works for us. I know it's not for everybody. And I think in some kitchens, they look very fitting and they look very beautiful. For what we're doing here, it's not really necessary. If we're gonna cook something stinky or we're gonna cook something messy, a lot of times we have two windows here. We'll open them up, get a good cross breeze, maybe put a fan in if we really need to, but it's usually not that big of an issue. Okay, underneath the copper, this is really important for the functionality of the kitchen. So my friend told me years ago that when you're thinking about your kitchen and how it's laid out, you really kind of want the things you use the most to be just like 2 steps away. And so I originally had all my spices over there in our baking cupboard, and that didn't work because every time I wanted to season something, I had to go in, pull out the basket, pick out what I needed. So what I did instead was get some of these are vintage, some of these are new. These are Le Parfait jars, and they're my favorite because mason jars have the 3-part system, which just makes me crazy, always having to unscrew it. These are just pop-top ones. I get these from Mountain Rose Herbs. They're great. They come in every size imaginable. I collect the vintage ones as I find them at different antique stores because I think they're fabulous. But like I said, these ones are new. And I just keep my most used sort of seasonings here. That way I can just reach across and grab them really quick. So I keep things like garlic powder, paprika, herbs de Provence, nutmeg, coriander, chili flakes, baking soda, cumin, curry, and a few other things that are out that I don't really know. I keep a little label on the bottom that tells me what it is, so that way I can remember what I need to reorder. Having them right there is really handy when you're cooking. It just makes it so much smoother. Functionality of the kitchen is incredibly important to the joy of cooking. When you're stumbling around trying to grab things or when things don't have a home, that's a big problem. And speaking of things having a home, one of the hardest things for me to find a home for in the kitchen was my cast iron. And so that happily lives down here in my drawer. So I have a variety of cast iron. This is my new Smithy sort of conglomeration of all their sizes. I absolutely love it. I have 4 sizes and I just keep them down there and they live there happily. Speaking of having things on hand that you're gonna need when you're cooking, this is kind of my next essential little area here. So this is actually a gift from Kat, who I just talked about with the copper, from Kat in France. This is a little pate dish, although I keep my butter in here. And I have to have something with a lid because the flies love butter and the cats love to lick butter. So definitely have a lid. I have olive oil, black pepper, sea salt. This is kind of, I cannot stand using salt shakers. So I do it all by, pinching. And it's amazing when you get used to doing it. You know what a tablespoon feels like. You know what a teaspoon feels like. So that is, of course, has to be right by the stove. And then we made some flavored oils actually here on the channel a couple of weeks ago. And I keep kind of whatever one I'm working through out. That's a rosemary oil. Now, let's talk about this area right here. This has changed more times than I care to count. And it's one of those things where we had to eventually just save up and do it right because we'd done it wrong so many times, wasted time, money, effort, energy, and dealt with a lot of frustration. So we have our huge walk-in cooler down in the root cellar. I'll link to a video on that. But I want to have a small little refrigerator here in the kitchen that just holds a few things that we use a lot of or use enough times a day, something like milk, where you don't want to have to go downstairs every time you want to bring something like that up. So I have bought every little fridge imaginable. After saving up yet again, just a couple of months ago, we added the next piece into our kitchen, which was this Sub-Zero refrigerator. We have used a lot of different refrigerators in here over the years, some really big ones until we built our big cold storage room down in the root cellar, and then some smaller ones that were just a really poor quality and did not do what we needed them to do at all. So this was definitely another investment piece, but it's serviced really well by a company that we have here. It's a very high quality product. And my favorite part about it is their pull-out drawers, which is really nice because you're not having to squat down to a small refrigerator. And then there's actually a freezer with an ice maker, which is just so posh I can barely take it. We feel like complete rich royalty having that in here. So even though this was a long time coming, actually even after we ordered it, it took like 6 months to get here. It is a very welcomed piece indeed. And then to top it off, we used a lot of cutting boards over the years, but I prep my food right next to my stove. That's where I like to do it. This is just butcher block from Lowe's. It's a piece. We cut it to fit our space. I mean, it's just as simple as it gets. I don't worry about doing anything to it other than oiling it with a food safe sort of sealant, whenever I remember to, which is not that often. I don't care if it gets messy. It's not that expensive. So this can take a beating. The marble cannot. So the marble is for breads and pastries and doughs and beautiful things like that. And all the chopping and all the gritty work gets done here on the butcher block. We obviously don't have a lot of drawers or really cupboards in general in this kitchen. So we keep our silverware right here in a little caddy. Again, it makes it really easy to just grab and take out to the dining room table if we want. The kids can easily reach it. They can easily unload the dishwasher into it. Pretty straightforward. And then this time of year especially, I always have little odds and ends left over from whatever it is we're cooking out of the garden. And so I just keep a little bowl here to hold extra garlic cloves or onions that I didn't finish using or the like. Underneath the butcher block here is where we keep our trash can. Again, logistically, if I'm standing right here cooking, it's a great place to drop garbage. And then we have our Berkey water filter right here. Again, at kid height where they can easily get to it. It's really easy to fill up from the kitchen sink. Okay, I think that's that part of the kitchen. Let's talk about this beast right here in the middle. One of the biggest things that we decided to redo in this kitchen after living with it for a few years in various ways was actually to completely eliminate kind of the island that we had built that sort of extended off. So if this is your first time seeing this kitchen, we used to have kind of a big table that came out here. And so if you wanted to walk in the kitchen, you had to go around it to get into the sink. Well, that was obviously not ideal. Again, we're trying to kind of take as few steps as possible, just thinking about what is the way the kitchen flows. So we just got rid of all that. And instead we got this antique table that's absolutely beautiful. It's very, very old. It came from Seattle, where a friend of mine saw it and said, I think this table was meant for you. And it actually was made for me, I'm sure. The cool thing about this table is it's a draw leaf table. So if you look under it, you can see there's actually 2 leaves that are underneath it. Now those pull out completely. So this is a 6-foot table. It'll draw out to a 12-foot table if we wanted to. The last time we did that was when we were making crab ravioli for my birthday, and we had our guests all kind of belly up to the table and help us make it. For the most part, we keep it just at this 6 feet. Having the kitchen table in here has completely changed the flow and the feel of our kitchen. I wrote a blog post about this. I'll make sure to tag it below. It's a place where the kids can sort of just belly up and, have their granola in the morning, or we can sit and have coffee and maybe hash out ideas. It's where guests will sort of come in and sit down and help peel potatoes. It makes it feel comfortable. It makes it feel lived in. You can easily sort of adapt it. We've actually sat a bunch of kids here. Like if our big table is full, the overflow will come into here in the kitchen. We've actually eaten dinner at this table many times with our friends. So it serves so many different functions. It can be prep space, it can be enjoyment space, it can be made beautiful. It was like the missing piece of our entire kitchen once we got this in here. Super happy with it. The other place that people sort of gather in this kitchen, because I really did want to cultivate a space that felt like people could live in here. This is a used kitchen. I know it doesn't look like it now, but it's usually messy and used and full of life. That's why I put these 2 chairs right here. Both of these chairs are kind of in dire need of needing to be restuffed and reupholstered, but I had no idea when I brought them into the kitchen a couple years ago just how much they would be used. This is the #1 place that people sit, whether it's guests or family members. This is where people sit. This is where we have our morning coffee. This is where, we write, we work, we create, we edit videos. Somebody will sit here while I'm cooking and we'll chat, we'll have wine. This is the zone. And so, they're used, they're loved. I'm constantly having to wipe stains off of them, but they add a comforting feel. It says you can come in here, you can relax, have a comfortable seat, and we'll see what comes next. So we're kind of going in a big circle like this around the kitchen. And so this is opposite that ice chest that houses our dishes. This is actually a butter making table, another antique find. And this is kind of a good reminder for this kind of layered lived in look. It does take time to acquire all these things. So we've had different versions of this over the years, but this is by far my favorite. So it's a table, it's just a little bit slanted. It has the drainage holes. So we have this big wooden piece that sits over the top if you were to actually want to make a bunch of butter on this table. But instead, we just have it in here and we use it as kind of our overflow for some of those things that we would have put on open shelving, but that I couldn't actually reach on open shelving. So this is where I keep my bread pots and bean pots, all of my kind of cooking wooden spoon utensils kind of a thing, extra casserole dishes, garlic, bowls, cast iron, Dutch ovens, that kind of thing. So again, this is something that's always shifting a little bit, but these are the things that I use often enough that they deserve to be in the kitchen. And I actually love the way they kind of cluster together and create this hey, if you want to come into my kitchen and you want to cook, here it all is. You're not going to be having to look through cupboards to try to find what you need because it's kind of all out here for the taking. The walls, again, were restored back to their original glory. And then this is just kind of where I keep an excess overflow of garlic or shallots, those kinds of things. This corner actually looks a lot different than it did when we moved in because originally, for the first couple years that we lived here, this was where the washer and dryer was. And I tried a lot of cheap and creative ways to hide that. Eventually it got to the point we just couldn't take it anymore and we hired a plumber to put it down into the basement. I'm really happy to not have my laundry up here anymore. What I wanted to do instead was to put in a fireplace. Because this kitchen is old, the walls are thin, it gets really drafty in our super cold winters. And so having a fireplace, it just adds that element of like, this is a comfortable space, it's warm, it's welcoming, come on in. This was a Craigslist find. It's a Yodel stove. I absolutely love it. And then Stu and Jeremy piped it in for us. So last year was its first year being able to be used, and it made all the difference here in the kitchen. It made it feel so cozy and so warm, and I'm really glad we went to the extra effort and waited all those years to get that finished. Then this window behind me, this was originally not here. This was just a solid wall, but I like being able to look out. This is the door that people come to. They walk into our kitchen. And so I like being able to look out and see who's here and, just add more light, more flowers, more inside-outside feel. The door was not like this. This was a Stuart find, little hobbit kickback here. So the rounded arch door, it just adds architectural interest. Let's talk real fast about the wallpaper. I get a lot of questions, what's this wallpaper? This is called French Marigold wallpaper, and I got it years ago from wallpaperwarehouse.com. Since then, Anthropologie picked it up, so I don't know if it's still available through Wallpaper Warehouse or if somehow Anthropologie got the exclusive rights to it. I don't really know how that works. I know it's going to be a lot more expensive from Anthropologie than it was from Wallpaper Warehouse, and it wasn't that cheap from Wallpaper Warehouse. But it's moody and it's dramatic, and I think it's really beautiful. So it was kind of the best way I could think of to add interest to these walls. I didn't want it to be too much wood. Again, with the juxtaposition, you kind of get this metallic floral with the crusty old wall, and I think it plays really well together. Now, the final piece to this kitchen, and one of the most important, was the floor that we put in. So this was AstroTurf carpet when we moved in. There was a faux floor that had been built on top of the old floor because the old floor had sagged so much. It's just an old house. We took all of that out and replaced it with this beautiful reclaimed French tile. This took a long time to come. It had to be sent in from France. It took a long time for us to save for it. It took a long time for us to install it, and I've had to sort of repair as I'm learning how to do this. So I actually have a few loose tiles over here that need to be redone. But on the whole, I love how it turned out. So to clean it, I just sweep it with a broom. Then I vacuum up the edges, and then I just use a broom dipped into a hot soapy water to just sort of scrub the floor. It's never perfectly clean. It always looks very lived in, as does the rest of this kitchen, but that's kind of the point. It adds those layers of life and history that make a house feel comfortable and make it feel like, hey, I could exist here. I don't need to worry about messing up. I don't need to worry about if I spill something on the floor. We'll take care of it later. This floor took us a lot of time to do, especially because we did 1/2-inch grout lines between the tile. The tiles are uneven, they're handmade, they're over 100 years old. The floor is uneven. We have a lot of things working against us. So considering all of that, I'm very, very happy with how it turns out. And it's the one thing, besides the wallpaper, I would say it's the one thing that gets the most compliments when people come to see the kitchen, because it's just kind of unique. I will try to remember to tag as many resources and all the blog posts and all that stuff that I can below the video. If I miss something, let me know in the comments so that I can try and help you understand how we built this kitchen and all the pieces that kind of go into making it what it is. This is the kitchen. That's 6 years in the making so far. A few more details to go, but I love how it turned out. And I love that this is the kitchen that we get to create from. We get to feed our friends, our family, our neighbors, and teach people to cook all across the world through the cooking community. So it's a very special space, and I hope you enjoyed the tour.